Hello and welcome to First Service Residential's Ask the Experts webinar. Today we'll address board meeting minutes, what they are, and why they're so important. Also, how to take minutes the proper way. My name is Catherine Efron. I'm a vice president in the high-rise division of First Service Residential, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. I'd like to just mention a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any questions throughout the event, please submit them through the Q&A option on your control panel. There's no need to take notes. We'll be recording this session and sending it to all attendees. We thank you all for joining us. And it will also be posted in the resource library of our website. In addition, we'll be sharing a resource in that chat, which we developed to guide you in recording effective minutes during board meetings, and we encourage you to review it and share it with your boards. Without further ado, a few First Service team members are joining me today for this discussion. First, I'd like to introduce Ivy Montero, Vice President.
Thank you, Catherine. It is wonderful to be here today, spending a little bit of time sharing best practices regarding board meeting minutes, and I look forward to our spending the next couple of minutes together.
Thank you, Ivy, and thank you for joining us. And Andrew Ziroleta, Regional Director.
Thank you. Great to be here, Catherine. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share my insight with anybody that may have any questions and on board meeting minutes.
Thank you both for participating. We also acknowledge that there are several types of meetings. I would like just to start with this very briefly. We all know there's regular board meetings, special meetings of the board, such as the budget meeting, perhaps a special assessment meeting, and there are also membership meetings of the owners, such as the annual meeting every year. They have different noticing requirements, but for the purpose of today's conversation, however, we're going to focus on regular meetings of the Board of Directors. So let's jump right in. Ivy, let's start by discussing the planning that goes into each board meeting. Can you give us a brief overview of what's involved?
Yes, Kat. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Preparation is the key to successful board meetings, and being mindful of the communication, how you're announcing the meeting time, the date, the location, posting or notifying at least 48 hours in advance. All that is part of the pre-preparation to the actual meeting.
Great points, Ivy. Thank you. Andrew, question for you. How do your CAM, Community Association managers, property managers, or the properties prepare for board meetings?
Well, Kat, great question. One of the greatest assets you can have within the association meeting is putting together a nice, comprehensive board binder that hopefully you can get the board can have in their hands at least 48 hours in advance, so they can be able to digest all the material. And within that binder, dividers. So those dividers can help you better organize the meeting itself, and being able to reference items very quickly. It makes the meeting so much more smoother, especially when those dividers include the proposals, the bid analysis, and policies that are to be reviewed for the meeting. And then, of course, also in terms of preparation is, do you need to invite a subject matter expert for some of the topics? As much as we want to be well-versed in everything that we are going to address, sometimes the best people are the people that are getting paid in that specific discipline.
Those are great points, Andrew. And what I hear you saying is organization is key. A wonderful thing that, First Service prepares for its boards of directors is what you mentioned, the board meeting binder. And whether it's by paper or virtual, it follows the line of the agenda. And that keeps the board on task, keeps everybody at the right pace and following the proper line of the agenda, which is so important. Ivy, let's now talk a bit about the board's goals and why it's crucial to understand them. why it's crucial for us to understand them.
Thank you, Kat. So the business plan of the association drives the agenda. So every meeting should be a step closer to meeting a business goal, the vision for the community, a 1-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan. Everything is working towards that direction. So you're running a corporation. What does that mean? That means that when a board member is sitting on the board, they're wearing the board hat. So their vision and their work should be in the best interest of the association. They are no longer a resident in the sense that personal agendas or personal preferences have to be put aside for the greater good, which is the association. And that's a big responsibility, and it takes discipline. The services that the board envisions and the direction of the board is supported by the budget, right? So we need to be very realistic on what can the board implement and how are they working towards those items that they want in their vision. Some things to think about that sometimes are not included is how are they going to be better, right? Should they include hospitality, concierge, pool and beach services if the associations are so lucky to be able to be near a beach, spa services, resident events? All of these things are should be part of your budget and become part of your goals. Again, the key is to make the association a little bit better every year. That comes with the financial position of the association. So do you have the finances to support your vision and your goals? Again, proper budgeting, and also being aware of how your documents are structured. I know many associations or many board members get the questions from residents. Well, I live in a 1-bedroom and I pay the same as a 3-bedroom. Well, your documents may be structured that each unit pays the same, or they can be structured by square footage, or they can be structured by percentage of ownership. All of this plays a part in how you're funding the budget in order to support that vision of the association.
So the theme here is being prepared, having priorities, for us as the management team to be tuned into the board's goals, vision, and needs. And that all ties together with the annual business plan. Every corporation has an annual business plan, and associations are no different. Let's talk a bit about board meeting minutes. Andrew, what are board meeting minutes by definition, and why are they necessary?
So board meeting minutes are a history of how your association voted on certain issues, whether it's policies or repairs. Ultimately, once these minutes have been approved at the next meeting, of course, they're always draft until they're approved, but once they've been approved, they are technically a legal document of the association. So we always have to stress that these minutes should never be a transcript of the meeting. You should, when you come upon a agenda item, you should be stating what the problem is, what are the potential resolutions, the motion, who made the motion, who made the second, and then the outcome of the vote. Those are the key things in your minutes, is what most time associations and the history they're going to be looking at is how did a certain vote go? Because this is imperative for when new board members come on. They're going to want to be able to take a look at the past year's minutes. How did the previous board vote? What were they thinking in terms of the problem and the resolution that they took? And then, of course, with knowing that you could be facing the same problem within the next couple of years, and now you kind of have a roadmap on how you want to come to that resolution under your tenure as a board member. And then, of course, when it comes back to you just want the motion second and vote, you want to be able to avoid any potential lawsuit. So we want to make sure that all of the minutes are fact-based. There's no opinion, there's no conjecture in it whatsoever, because minutes are normally the first document that will be subpoenaed by an attorney if there's a lawsuit in hand.
And it's important as well, we talk about being technologically advanced. We must preserve the minutes of meetings. And so whether they're backed up to a cloud and kept in a binder, both should really be done. Another key takeaway I heard you talking about, Andrew, is record keeping and documentation. They're very important, as you stated, with respect to the notice of the meeting and the minutes. But we should be careful to note, again, that the minutes of the meetings, once transcribed, should not contain every spoken word, rather the motions and the dispensation of votes. That's a great segue for our next segment. Ivy, we understand that how minutes are recorded does matter. What are some best practices that you can share with us for how minutes should be taken? For example, keeping an objective tone, stating the facts, and memorializing the actual votes.
Yes, thanks, Kat. That's a great starter to show how the minutes should be recorded. Sticking to the facts, the facts, the facts, the facts, and only the facts, because that's where being subjective or innuendos or tone or specific discussion of specific people can result in potential lawsuits that Andrew was talking about. So we want to make sure that this is a business document that is memorializing the votes and the actions taken by the board. So stick to the facts. When you have specific documents or presentations, summarize them neutrally, right, in the minutes. There was a presentation, there was a guest speaker, they talked about, item X, and then move on. Not a lot of conversation or discussion or who had an opinion on the facts or what the votes were. Also document how individuals voted, and remove anything that can create scrutiny for the board. So you want to make sure that you are documenting how the vote went, but not necessarily who voted for what, right? So what are the results of that? Also, the minutes, and we referred to it earlier, creates a timeline for new board members. So it is easy to go back to those minutes and in a fact-based way, see what was accomplished 2 years ago, 1 year ago, how did we get to where we are, and what are items that still need to be addressed?
That's a great explanation, Ivy. I'm glad you also touched on guests who are invited to attend board meetings, subject matter experts, whether it be the attorney or the engineer, a designer, perhaps an architect. We should memorialize for a historical perspective, for the sake of the minutes, people who attended, people who were guests, what was their expertise and title. Andrew, what should be included in board meeting minutes? Also, we talked about being concise, but what else can you add to that?
So one thing that Ivy said was she was really, really emphatic about flow. And that's what your minutes should always do. Your minutes should be a flow of how the agenda went. You could take the agenda and almost mirrorize it put a mirror to the minutes themselves. Your time of call to order, your proof of notice, quorum. If there's any board members present or they're absent, you've got them in there. Then approval of minutes, old business, new business, and then again we're back to voting. You have your motion, your second, and how the results of the vote went. And then again, you can put your problem in there and the potential resolutions, but again, make it fact-based as much as possible. And then of course, when was the meeting adjourned?
I think also, thanks, Andrew, great points. Our board should also understand that we need to include such things as ratifying change orders for projects, if there are projects taking place, signatories on banking accounts, any new insurance policies that were renewed, also the organizational meeting of the board after the annual meeting, and any board resolutions that are authored by association council throughout the year should also be included in the minutes. Ivy, let's dive into voting. How should the voting process for agenda items be documented?
So for voting, we should include the motion, the second, the outcome of the vote, the number of members that voted for or against, and also who abstained from the vote. What we don't mention are members' names or how they voted. The reason we don't want to mention this in the minutes is for the integrity of the vote. We don't want any board member feeling pressured and not voting their conscience because it may not be the popular vote. We want to make sure that the board members, each of the board members, are confident that they can vote their conscience, they can vote the direction that they want to go in without any fear that down the line they're going to be singled out for voting one way or another when it comes to memorializing those votes. The other thing I wanted to touch on from the previous segment was what is included in the minutes. And let's not forget to add another best practice, which is including the approval of ACC guidelines or approvals of modifications of a home in accordance with the ACC guidelines or approvals of applications. If your documents dictate that the board should approve these should be documented in the minutes also by address, not by homeowner, by address, so that there is a memorialization of who got approved and that they did get approved to live in the community and or to modify their home.
That's right, Ivy. Thank you. And we do realize that these minutes live on long after the meeting has taken place. And so with respect to that, we memorialize unit owner numbers, not necessarily names, lot numbers, not necessarily names. And Ivy, what about the conflicts of interest when it comes to voting? How should these be handled?
So any board member that has a relationship with a vendor, if they are voting on a capital improvement or hiring a new vendor, changing a landscaping company, if there is a relationship or a financial interest in the company being voted on, that board member should recuse themselves. Now, every board member has a vote, whether they're, regardless of the position that they hold. I know that it's long been discussed that the president doesn't vote only to break a tie. The president is actually a board member and is entitled to one vote. The only reason for somebody to recuse themselves would be for a conflict of interest. I've seen it in some meetings where a board member recuses themselves because it's not a popular vote or because they don't want to be involved or they don't want to engage. However, remember in the beginning of this program when we talked about when you're sitting on the board, you wear the board hat. It is the responsibility to make a commitment, to have a vote, to support moving forward. That is a huge responsibility on the board members, and only to recuse themselves if there is a legitimate conflict of interest.
So we discussed why minutes are necessary. Thank you, Ivy and Andrew, and practices for recording them. Can anyone share a story of how a community or a community did not follow these recommendations, of course, before we managed them, and maybe what were the consequences?
Of course, Kat. So before we managed an association, I had an issue that when we got the minutes, we saw that there was, each minute was pretty much a transcript of the meeting. And ultimately, we knew this was going to be bad news. And of course, when association council saw it after a lawsuit had been filed, they called it out as well. And of course, right away, the council that had filed the lawsuit claimed intent and was able to prove intent. And let's just say it was not a favorable decision for the association based on those minutes. And that's why we always have to promote motion, second, vote. That's it. Keep facts in your minutes. And if you can, brevity is your friend.
Yeah. When in doubt, really stay connected to Association Council. Don't rely on, and it's not fair to the board members themselves, actually. They're not there to provide legal advice to their own association. So when you can, lean on the attorney for professional advice. We've had a number of questions come in today from our participants, and here's just a few. Thank you all for your wonderful questions. One viewer asked us to please discuss when and how to approve minutes. Who would like to take that?
I can take that. So minutes are approved, minutes are reviewed in draft form once they are compiled after the meeting, and then they are approved at the next meeting, making sure to ratify any corrections to those minutes.
Great answer, Ivy. Andrew, maybe you can take this one. It reads, how to put sensitive topics in minutes. How do we put sensitive topics into the minutes of the meeting, such as police reports, perhaps abusive behavior? Do we refer that to our attorney? Do we attempt that ourselves?
I mean, ultimately, in minutes, you want to keep it as detailed as possible in terms of what is actual facts. When it comes to association attorney opinions, you're going to want to speak with your association counsel, because you do not want to run into the potential issue of waiving attorney-client privilege, because then you could run into issues down the road on other potential attorney opinions. So when in doubt, if you have a question, speak with your association counsel on how it should be put in there, if it should be put in the minutes at all.
Great. And another viewer with us today asked the question, how do we address fines during a board meeting? Great question.
So when the board has to vote on the fine, again, we go by unit number, right? So they can go down the unit numbers and say, you know, these residents, or this, not the residents, this unit is up for fining. They've received the first, second, and third notice. There's usually a member of the violations committee there. They can give their report, and the board votes to proceed with the fine. It should be included in the minutes, either, again, by unit number and the result. Are we moving forward or not? And I've also seen sometimes where the committee's report is attached to the minutes, not with the detail of the resident. Again, we keep to the unit number, and the board vote to proceed with imposing the fine. And from there, it will go to the fining committee to actually impose the fine.
Thank you. Thank you. And we should also note that there are separations between boards of directors and fining, sometimes called grievance committees, sometimes called violation committees, but they're separate and apart from one another. So to be mindful of everyone's time today, I'd like to wrap this up. If there are any further questions in the question box that we did not address today, we will have one of our team members from your local area follow up with you. And as we wrap this up, Andrew and Ivy, are there any key takeaways that you'd like to highlight for those who are attending our webinar today?
Yes, thank you, Kat, for that. Again, sticking to the facts and making sure that the important votes and the important information is documented in those minutes, not only for the benefit of the residents and the unit owners of the community, but also to support a foundation for those new board members when they come on board, for them to have a confident knowledge of where the community has been, where it is today, and where it's going to go. Also, to make sure, even if there is a meeting that has been called that doesn't have a quorum, or had to be rescheduled, document that also. That way, when you're keeping the binders that Andrew suggested, or the catalog of, of the minutes, you know why there was a month that you don't have minutes for.
Thanks, Ivy. Well, this has been another great discussion that I know will be of great value to the board members we serve. Andrew and Ivy, I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and your time as well. And to all of our attendees, thank you all for joining us. We hope you found the information helpful and that you'll find ways to take what you've learned and put it to use in your community. We'll get this recording to you as soon as possible so you can share with your fellow board members. Thank you so much.